I'm Joan Jach, and today I'm going to teach you how to make elderberry syrup. We're going to go ahead and get started with the elderberry syrup. And whether you have a kit or not, I'm going to tell you what we're doing, what the ingredients are, and the steps to do it. Elderberries are native. They like to grow in wet spots. So a lot of times you'll see them in a low area or maybe next to creeks or ponds. And they are perennial, which means that they come back every year. So you can harvest their flowers and their fruit from them every year. I actually have elderberries growing in my yard. I transplanted some from my friend's farm. And those aren't even the ones that took root in my yard. The ones that took root were the ones that I think came from the birds that had visited other elderberries in the alley behind my house. So I am lucky enough to have elderberries growing right within my blackberries and raspberries next to my peach tree. So it's interesting that where they're growing in my yard really reflects where they like to grow in the wild, which is on the edge of things and near low spots because it's wet in the back of my yard. So let's go ahead and get started. If you don't have your ingredients out, what you're going to need are your elderberries, your ginger, your cinnamon, and your cloves and water. And you're going to need a pot and a stove. And I'm doing this a little bit in reverse because I have my water already in my pot and I'm going to add everything into the pot. Usually what I'll do is I'll put all of the ingredients into the pot and then cover it with water. So you have your these are dried elderberries. I'm going to add them into here. You can make elderberry syrup with fresh elderberries. You just need to use more because the dried elderberries are more concentrated. So you need to use about twice as much, about 2 cups because this is about 1 cup of elderberries. You need to use about 2 cups if you're doing it with fresh or with frozen. Because a lot of times what I do is I'll pick the elderberries, I'll de-stem them, and then I'll put them in a Ziploc bag and make them flat so that they store easy in the freezer, and then I'll just freeze them. So you want to add your cinnamon, and if you have cinnamon stick, go ahead and use cinnamon stick. That's usually what I use in the kits today. We have powdered cinnamon, which is totally fine too, if that's all you have. And add your cloves. If you don't like cloves, you don't have to put cloves in there. You know, if that's too much of a scent that you don't want to have or to taste, you don't have to put them in there. Now there is a note at the bottom of your elderberry syrup in the pro tips that says, is it in here? Yes, it's over here in the ingredients, the optional add-ins. You can add dried mushrooms, you can add lemon balm, you can add elderflower, which is the flowering part of this plant. You can add rose hips, you can add citrus to this. It's pretty much, the elderberries are the base for it, but typically we add cinnamon, cloves, and ginger to this. So I'm going to go ahead and peel the ginger. And I always peel my ginger. I feel that there are some people who leave the skin on their ginger. I do not like it because I think it leaves a bitter taste. So if you have a sharp paring knife, all you're going to do, you could also use a peeler, a vegetable peeler. All you're going to do is just peel off that very thin outer layer, that brown skin of the ginger. Be careful. These knives here are very sharp. They were just sharpened. And this is about a 1-inch chunk of ginger. I think that's a good place to start. You can always add more, especially if you really like ginger, but it's going to make the syrup pretty potent because you are going to be simmering all the stuff together. And so when ginger gets simmered and cooked in any way, the flavor really comes out. So if you're not sure, if you don't like a lot of ginger, just go ahead and use that 1-inch piece. But if you know that you like ginger, go ahead and add as much as you want. I really like ginger, especially in the winter because it stimulates your circulatory system and it keeps you warm. Same with hot pepper, turmeric, things like that. And I'm just taking the ginger, and you'll find that ginger has a grain so that when you're cutting it, you'll find that one way is easier to cut on it. I always cut that way first and make long strips, and then I just cut it into little squares. If you want to grate your ginger, that's okay too. You can just take it and do it either on the large or the small side of the box grater, that's totally fine. I don't usually grate my ginger because I find that too much of it gets made into juice. And so you're left with a lot of waste. Also, if you are trying to scrape it out of the holes of the grater. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn this on here. So what we have in the pot right now are your elderberries, your cinnamon, your ginger, your cloves, and the water. And I'm just gonna give it a quick stir to get that cinnamon all mixed up in there. Get everything all mixed together. And you want to heat this up and bring it to a boil. Now, if you're going to be adding something like lemon balm leaves or elderflower or anything that's not a root or a bark, you want to bring this to a boil, let it stop boiling, and then add those things, because those leaves and flowers are especially delicate. You don't want to boil them. It makes too much of their volatile oils come out all at once. You want to do that last so that you get the most of their medicinal properties. Most of the time when I make elderberry syrup, I get the elderberries I forage them, or wildcraft, if you want to call it that. If you are going to do that, I have a few tips for you. Foraging and wildcraft can come with a lot of responsibility. Number one is you need to ask if you're going onto someone else's property. So, if you see some in somebody's yard, go up to them and say, hey, I really want to collect your flowers or your berries from this elderberry. Is that okay with you? Most of the time people will tell me that. Don't collect from right near a road or a highway or right near a railroad, because those places are sprayed often with pesticides and herbicides. And there's also traffic, which creates a lot of pollution, a lot of dirt and dust is coming off the road and landing on those plants that are on the side of the road. So we don't want to forage on the edge of roads or highways or near the railroad, or any place where where they regularly spray chemicals. So near conventional farm fields, we don't want to forage near those places. And when you're foraging, if you find maybe a hedgerow of elderberries or elderflowers, more importantly, don't take all of it. The rule is to take no more than 15% of what the stand is. You want to leave some for the birds and the natural wildlife that is in that area, especially the flowers of the elder tree. You need to leave those, because if you take all the flowers, there won't be any berries later in the summer. So that's really important to remember. And then mark it on a map or mark it in your phone. Say, this is where I collected the flowers, and then come back at the end of August, which is when the berries are usually ripe. See if you can beat the birds to pick the berries, because I have a hard time beating the birds. There are many years where I think, oh, they're ripe, I'm gonna go out there, and the birds have already eaten half of them. So this is getting up to a simmer. The point here is bring it to a boil briefly, turn it down, and then simmer it until your liquid reduces by half. This requires some patience on your part. So this part might not get done during this class, because you're gonna need to let it simmer, go away. So I have another pot of elderberry concentrate that I've prepared. So basically what we're doing is making a decoction. This is when you take herbs and you cook them down so that the liquid reduces. It's a very concentrated form of tea, basically, but we call it a decoction. So you can see that steaming, we're getting up there. I'm gonna turn that up just a little bit more. You want to pay attention. Don't leave the room, because if it starts to boil, you don't want it to boil over, and you don't want it to boil for a really long time. After we bring it to the boil and it is simmering, liquid has reduced by half, you want to let it steep for at least an hour. Sometimes I just put a cover on it and I let it steep overnight. It just depends on what my schedule is. If I have time, or if I'm maybe doing something else in the kitchen, I'll let it steep, let it cool down, and then I'll strain it, or how desperately you really need it, because if somebody is maybe not feeling well and you want the elderberry syrup to give to them, you might need to just let it steep for an hour, strain it, add the honey and then use it. So it's really up to what your needs are. So this was really boiling. I gave it a stir. I'm going to turn it up just a little bit. You just want it to be simmering so that it's steaming, so that you know that the water is evaporating, so that you are decreasing the water and you're concentrating that extract of the herbs that are in there. If you are doing the fast method, you at least want to let it cool down so that when you're straining it, you aren't going to burn yourself. Cheesecloth, it will come all folded up like this. What you want to do is open it up, and then on the long seam, you'll open it up again. So you want to open it up until it's one single layer, like this. Then you want to fold it in half, and then fold it in half again. So basically you're making a large square. So basically I've created 4 layers of cheesecloth that I'm going to be filtering through. This is my ideal way that I do cheese. Okay, so I have this little strainer. It's over a glass measuring cup. You could also use a colander inside of a bowl. Any way you want to do that. If you don't have any cheesecloth, you can use a clean old t-shirt or piece of cloth or a tea towel. Just make sure it's clean, and just know that after you do strain the elderberries through there, it will be dyed. Because the elderberries are a very potent color. So it's a dark blue black. And you take your cheesecloth. This is why I like to make that big square, because then you can gather up all those 4 corners and hold it down low, because you can see it's coming out of there. And you want to gently use your hand to press it, and then I will twist this cheesecloth to create more pressure. Hold it down low, because when you are pressing this, those berries will pop, and this will just go spraying all over the kitchen. So you can see I'm just squeezing it out of here. When you're done, this should be pretty, there should be not a lot of water left in here. So you'll have this kind of mass that's left in your cheesecloth. If you want, you could take that and use it again. You could make, because really there's a lot more medicine in here. You could make tea with it. You could put it in your compost pile. You could make a tincture with it using alcohol, so brandy or vodka, and just cover it with the brandy or vodka in a jar. So just know that those aren't totally done, especially because these weren't soaking for a super long time. Not all of the medicine was extracted from there. So that's still valuable. You don't have to simmer all the liquid out when the elderberries are, when all the herbs are in here. After you strain it, after it's been sitting long enough that you want it, that you feel like it's okay, you can pour this back into your pot and simmer it again and get it down to the level that you want to get it down to. But if you do that, if you're going to use your same pot, you want to rinse your pot. Let's talk about jars for a minute. The jar that you're going to put this in needs to be sterilized. Now, if you've ever done any home canning, this should be easy peasy for you. But if you haven't, you need to take your jar and put it in covered with water on the stovetop, and bring the water to a boil, boil it for 10 minutes. This is standard disinfection of the jars. Why do we need to sterilize a jar? And are jars straight out of the package sterilized? No, they're not. So bottle jars you get from the grocery, you need to sterilize those before you use them. We need to sterilize this jar because if there's anything in here and you were going to put your elderberry syrup in there, there is more of a chance that it will mold or go bad. And you don't want to waste all that hard work by putting it into a jar and having it go bad. Say you only had half a cup of honey, then you'd pour half a cup into your pot and add half a cup of honey. The point is that you want your honey amount and your elderberry concentrate to be the same. You want them to be equal. So it'll be half elderberry concentrate and half honey. Okay, so I have 2.5 cups. So I'm gonna pour 1 cup in here so that I get to 1.5 cup. Because this is a cup. This is 8 ounces, right? I'm pretty sure. want to do is pour it into your pot. You're going to pour the whole thing because it's equal. We want 1 cup honey to 1 cup elderberry concentrate. If you have 2 cups honey and you make 2 cups of elderberry concentrate, you can do that. That's going to make a lot of elderberry syrup. That's when maybe you're giving it away to friends and family, or maybe you have a big family and you use it a lot. I'm going to let this kind of drain down to the bottom. I had an email question before the class from somebody asking me if this was syrup that you put on your pancakes. And the answer is you can put this on your pancakes. It's not like maple syrup. So it will be thick because of the honey, but it's not going to be like a syrup that is maple syrup. Now, if you really like maple syrup, what you could do is sub the honey with maple syrup. But if you do that, I don't know how long that will last because maple syrup compared to honey, I don't know the sweetness. We know that honey as a sweetener and as a preserver in our elderberry syrup, we know that it will last about a month in the refrigerator. Any preparation, any herbal preparation that has water as part of it, you have to be super careful how it's preserved. So you either want to preserve it with a lot of sugar or sweetener, or you want to preserve it with alcohol. Sometimes if I know that I'm not going to use all of that elderberry syrup, what I'll do is I'll make the elderberry concentrate and I'll put it in jars with enough, sterilized jars with enough headspace, and I will freeze it. So headspace is how much space you leave at the top. And I'll just put it in my freezer. I will label it because if you don't, you'll forget what it is. Ask me how I know this because I've done that so many times. Label it and label it with the date and say this is elderberry concentrate so that when you need it, you can just take it out of the freezer, defrost it in a pan, add the honey, and boom, you have elderberry syrup. If you're going to freeze it, I would say don't freeze it for more than a year because all those herbs lose their potency after about a year. So we have, let me switch these around. That's our one that's still cooking. In here we have our honey and our elderberry concentrate, and you just want to gently stir those together so that they combine. They won't want to combine on their own, so you do have to stir them, and it helps if it's barely warm. Don't boil it at this point. Boiling honey is never recommended because it will destroy some of the nutrients in honey that give it its beneficial quality. So you always want to heat honey very gently. It sure smells good. This one is still boiling here, or still simmering. I'm gonna turn that up a little. So you stir those all together. And you will tell it'll get thicker, and then you want to put it in your jar. It will last longer if you keep it in the refrigerator. Some people I know don't keep it in the fridge. I always recommend it to keep it in the fridge. If you would like to put alcohol in there, you can put up to 25%. So that means if you have 2 cups, half a cup of alcohol, but then that's going to increase your total volume, so it won't all fit in your pint jar. So you might just have a little bit left over that you need to put in a little container. Alcohol will make it last longer, just naturally. That's how herbal preparations are that have alcohol. Tinctures made with alcohol last up to 10 years. So if you know you want it to last a little bit longer, you can add alcohol in there. Dosage, and the dosage is on the recipe card at the bottom. If you feel like you are getting sick, the dosage is always take something about every hour. Depending on if you're a child or adult, you're going to take a different amount. If you have never taken elderberry syrup before, I recommend that you just do a test. And so just to make sure that you're not allergic to anything. This is what I recommend to people when they take new herbs, is make sure that you're not allergic to anything. So dosage is 1/2 to 1 teaspoon for kids. or 1/2 to 1 tablespoon for adults. This is every day, just to boost your immunity, especially during the winter. If you do feel sick, then that increases. So it's normal dose every 2 to 3 hours, or once a day. Oh, instead of once a day for up to 24 hours, or until your symptoms subside. If you're really feeling bad, I always tell people you can take it every hour, or that the child can take their recommended size dose every hour for up to 24 hours. Don't do it every hour for more than a day, because that's a lot. So yeah, do a test, make sure nobody's allergic, and keep it in the refrigerator. Herbal tinctures are basically herbs steeped in alcohol, and then you strain out the herbs. So this is a hard one to answer because there are certain constituents and herbs that are only brought out through alcohol, and there are certain constituents and herbs that are only brought out through water. Mushrooms is a great example, and this is why you always do a double method for mushrooms. You do them in alcohol for a month, and then you do them in water, just like we did today. You make a decoction. So the alcohol becomes saturated with the medicinal qualities of what it's with. So whether that's the honey or it's the herbs, and becomes a preservation method and a method of delivery, because when you take alcohol, some of it will go underneath your tongue, and it's called sublingual, and it will go immediately into your bloodstream. And so when alcohol is imbued with all of those chemical constituents, the medicinal properties of the herbs, it's being delivered into your system much faster than if you were taking a tea or a capsule. So that's why tinctures are absorbed into your body really fast, because they're alcohol. They're usually taken sublingually. So, don't drink the whole bottle of alcohol. If it's half alcohol and half elderberry concentrate, that might not be healthy, but it's not going to negate those health benefits of the honey. Oh, particular mushrooms. So reishi mushroom is one of my favorites. You can also use chaga mushroom. And chaga, actually, if you are anywhere up in Wisconsin or Michigan, you can look around, and chaga likes to grow on birch trees. And if you're in an area where it's okay to forage, you can look for it. But I have dried reishi mushroom from mountain rose herbs, and that's what I would add to here. I also add that to vegetable broth or to chicken broth when I'm making soup, when I'm making any sort of broth for soup, because the reishi mushrooms are just so beneficial. They get their immunity properties, their antiviral. Chaga mushrooms you can forage any time of year. I've done it in the summer before, but I feel like in the winter you might actually be able to see them better, because the birch trees are white, and then there's not as many leaves on the trees. And so that one also, if you're going to forage, you need to know what you're looking for, making sure that that's what you're getting. I like powdered mushroom, but not for elderberry syrup. I like to put that in coffee or in tea or in soup bases and things like that. So if I'm going to do mushroom in the elderberry syrup, I'm going to use the chunked or the sliced reishi, either fresh or dried, whatever you can find, or lion's mane or any of those other medicinal mushrooms, and put those in after it's come to the boil. So those are those delicate things.